Hello folks and welcome back to Life Behind the Trig Season 2, I believe is what we're calling it. It is myself, Kyle Randalls, and my hard-breathing amigo here sitting next to me, Sinclair Patience, back for Season 2. This time we're actually sitting in person. Sinclair drove down last night, battered the rains, the hail, the storm to be here to entertain you all. And we've just had our breakfast rolls, our coffee, and we're raring to go.
Some good rolls. Thanks for having me at Castle Randalls, Kyle. First time down in Falkirk. So yeah, appreciate it.
Obviously like the place, yeah, really impressed.
Well, it's I either went to Polmont or here. So Polmont's a young offenders jail. So I picked Castle Randalls. It's on the sign, so outside Castle Randalls, home of Braemar champ.
You actually made me just question whether it said Castle Randalls on the front of my house there. So that's. But yeah, we were sitting and Sinclair realised there that it's actually been, was it 3 years he said?
3 years, I think 2020 was the last podcast that we did. So yeah, 3 years since the last one.
It's been a fair hiatus. But it's honestly, it's good to, it's weird sitting in person though. Like, you're sitting having to look at the audio again, you're having to put the mic in a certain place, and I don't know, I find that it's going to be different anyway, because this is what we basically do when we're at a games. We're just sitting. Definitely
different. Last time we did the podcast series, I was basically just on my mobile phone. So anytime I got a text or a call come in, we had to do a bit of editing around it. But yeah, much better sitting face to face.
And you got a lot of texts and phone calls because you're the big man,
guy,
right?
Popular guy.
That's exactly it. But the plan for this one's a sort of recap. The I guess the sort of vibes of the last two seasons. But we're going to skip season 2021. We had a couple of virtual games. I think we had two go ahead really, but it was series and Oban, and then there's a load of virtual events. But largely it was worth skimming over, really, isn't it? Like it was more everyone was trying to remember how to throw rather than.
Yeah, it was a strange time, and we kind of referred to it like the year prior during the podcast that everyone was doing bits and pieces of training, but you weren't really preparing for a season. So last season 22 was the first season that we'd actually had a proper lead in, and everyone kind of knew that events were going to go ahead. And we actually had a full season 2022.
Yeah.
We were chatting just before the podcast there, and I think I did my most ever Highland Games. I did over 30 Highland Games in Scotland last year, and you're always kind of up around that number, Kyle.
Yeah, I think maybe it was 2021 I was 40. I think I did 40, and this year I think I was 35. Before that I'd probably say I was normally 30 because I wouldn't go as many of the midweek ones. So just to verify what you've just said as well, you're saying that you took multiple years off with your family and that, and then COVID sort of railroaded you, and you decided the best prep for coming back was to do as many games as you possibly can on your return leg.
Well, in the COVID break I had two children, so
yeah.
Really good opportunity to get out of the house. Not that I don't love being at home, Sarah, my darling wife. But yeah, it was. I think, to be honest, I was just really excited that the games were back up and running. I'd had a good winter leading in, and yeah, it was just great to get back out on the field and competing again, because that's kind of what I think everyone really missed in those COVID years, was just the competition element of the games. Training's great, but at the end of the day, we train to compete.
Again, I struggled with getting a bit of, I suppose in sport you'd call it like match fitness.
Yeah.
Like getting yourself ready to go out, and this is the problem with our sport. It's not like you play a game of, say, rugby or football on a Saturday or a Sunday, and then you're back out the weekend after. It's pretty much every Saturday, Sunday, so there wasn't like a gentle, I'll lure myself back in. It was...
No, it's not, and it's not even like you can go out and throw a full games in training, but you're usually going to do that within an hour.
Yeah.
Whereas the first games back for me was Gourock, and it was
a long drive.
It was a long drive. It was about a 4-hour drive, and then it was a full day of throwing. I think we had 15 throwers or something. Yeah. So it was literally on the field from 11 in the morning till after 6 p.m. at night, and it wasn't so much the throwing that takes out of you, it's just being on your feet for that long at 22 stone.
The funny thing is, I've been to Gourock almost every year since I was a wee boy, where Brother Robertson used to take me, and that was the first year that actually had like a full roster of events. It used to just be like 5 or 6 events, but that was 2 hammers, 2 weights, the full shebang.
Full games, yeah. It was actually, I really enjoyed it. My first time there. but I think it's come from being an amateur games. So
Yeah.
to have 8 events or 7 events, we didn't have a heavyweight, unfortunately. But but yeah, it was good. Really enjoyed Guruk, and I'll probably try and go back next year.
There's something we could actually touch on. Since I started the sport like 15, 16 years ago, I would say there was an amateur professional divide in terms of like geography. And I feel like a lot of the games that used to be amateur have now sort of moved over to being professional. I don't know if it's the same up the north. I know there used to be quite a few up there.
Yeah, well, I think we've touched on it previously in the last series, but there did used to be a real divide, and amateur was very much amateur. You couldn't take prize money. Once amateur games started offering prize money, essentially they become professional anyway, really.
Yeah.
So I think it reduces barriers just having them all kind of classed as professional, although a lot of those amateur games like to hold on to that status.
Yeah. I mean, if you really look at the only difference is the shape you throw out of.
Yeah.
That is honestly about it. There's really no change. But yeah, like let's just touch season 2022. So not the season we just had, the one before. What were your sort of like? What was your take on it?
I thought it was great. Like I said, I did a number of games, over 30, and I was just excited to see the games back up and running. We definitely had a few casualties, I think, through COVID. Quite a number of games haven't returned, and there's probably various reasons to that. And I've seen it through my work as well, that it's becoming increasingly difficult to get volunteers for things. And I think that's probably the case with games committees. But some of the bigger games in the north, like Granton, we haven't seen since COVID, and also Invercarron. There's probably quite a few in the south as well.
Yeah, I know Shots used to be one of my favourite games, run by Jan Deary, Paul Deary. That family were heavily involved. That was always the same day as Cornhill, so I always had this like debate at the start of the season. Do I drive 4 hours up to go to Cornhill and get a good start in the Glenfiddich, or do I go 20 minutes along the road to Shots? And Shots was actually the first games I ever competed at. It was myself, wait till you hear this lineup, myself, Gregor Edmonds, Hamish Davidson and Jason Young.
Oh, keeps getting better.
So I've got a wee special place for Shots, but I sadly don't think that'll be back anytime soon. And we were sort of sitting hashing this out and going through it. So I think most of the casualties have been fairly recent, and a lot of them I think they want to go, but as you said, it was committees. And the biggest loss probably in terms of the games we'd regularly attend is probably Granton.
Yeah.
Because it was part of the Glenfiddich League. It was the 13th game.
Yeah.
And with that being gone, that's obviously one less there. And it turns Lonnoch from like a double weekend, because it used to be Lonnoch on the Saturday, Granton on the Sunday. It's now just Lonnoch as a standalone, which at the end of the season isn't necessarily all that bad a thing.
No, definitely not. But it's definitely been sad to see some games fall off. But at the same time, we had a number. Most still run, and just like to say a big thanks to the committees for getting them back up and running, because I think that 2022 season started us off again in a really strong position. What about you in terms of kind of highlights for that comeback year, Kyle? You had a really good season on the field. Any highlights that stand out for yourself?
Oh God, it's hard to. They sort of blend together, eh? And I'm honestly struggling, like in my head, to differentiate between 2022 and 23.
Yeah.
So thank you for putting me first and giving me no time to think about that. I have to say, 2022, my highlight was probably winning Braemar.
Yeah, big one.
Like Willie Robertson used to say to me, "Oh, you need to try and win Crieff, you need to win Braemar." Those were the two. So that was actually the first time I'd won both of them.
Yeah.
So for me, that was like a box tick.
I was second at both of them.
See, to be fair, I remember watching you. Again, I'm maybe jumping the gun a bit, but Braemar, right? It was myself and Sinclair throwing, talking away, you know what it's like. And he had this massive bruise on his leg. And I am still convinced, we're all convinced that Sinclair's darling wife Sarah got the makeup out and put a fake bruise on. Because I watched him go 80 plus and 40 plus in the weights.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't mention that as his highlight, or part of his highlight of the year, he's talking absolute nonsense. But for me, 2022, I would say that's the year that my weights became more consistent. Like you and I remember we were laughing, like, was it June into July, we had this ding-dong battle on the weights, and you won most of them, but we literally were always over like 82 feet.
Yeah.
And we had like a string of like 3 weekends where we're 80 odds. And we're thinking like, oh, what's happening here? And then 2 weeks into like August, we're throwing like 79 feet. You're like, what happened?
It went up and down a bit, but yeah, for me, that's definitely a highlight. I think just coming, I hadn't done many games in 2020, or the year before, sorry, 2019. I had only done 5 games, so that was kind of a bit of a comeback season, and I was really pleased with how I threw. Pretty consistent across the board, but the weights were going well. Like I think by the end of the season, I'd thrown about 85 and 44, but certainly having that competition with yourself, I think, pushed me on. Because like you said, Old Meldrum Aberdeen, we were 84 both days with the lightweight, and then this season your heavyweights really come on.
Yeah.
So again, I think we've been pushing 42, 43, sometimes up to 44 foot with the heavyweight, which has been brilliant. But yeah, my highlights aren't so much whole games. I think my highlights would be winning the 2 weights at Braemar with 83 and 43.
With your makeup on your leg.
With the makeup. I pulled my quad 2 weeks before, and I remember speaking to Bruce Aitken, and after I threw the 83, because I was sitting at 77 before that, and came up on my final throw to 83, and Bruce sort of pulled me to the side and said, you need to pull your quad more often. But it also makes me a bit depressed, because it shows that I'm doing something very wrong when I'm fit.
Yeah, you're jumping 6 foot as well. I can remember watching, and I thought, right, the 28 is one of the early events at Braemar, and I can remember watching, and I thought, oh, Sinclair's going to pit me here. And I remember you just summoned this throw, and it's like the greats of the games came down and lifted it as it was about to land at 80 foot and put it beyond. And I thought, oh, here we go.
Nah, it was good but I mean, my highlights are a couple of events. I think you had a very, very consistent season back, and we're pushing for big wins like Crieff, like Braemar, and then you obviously have carried that in really well to this season. What about this year? You won Braemar again, but I would say on a whole, your throwing's kind of gone up a level since the year prior.
2023 for me was, I mean, honestly, what you said, like my mindset was like trying to carry momentum. So in my head I was like, right, I want to be over 50 every games, which I'm sure you know, thrown in Scotland where some of the putts and the stones were presented as very difficult. And so I didn't manage that, but I took an average this year. Every games I went to this year for the first time, I kept a diary, I wrote down all my distances, and I think I put it on Instagram if you do want to see it. But I'm going to try and do that every year now. So my aims were over 50 foot, over 40. The 40 I think I did do minus Inverary, where someone did beat me in the heavy putt. I can't remember who that was.
Can't remember.
So I would say this, like last year and especially this year, my mindset and my highlight is honestly bringing a consistent game. Everything was sort of better. And my biggest highlight of this year, again, it's something that I believe I very arrogantly said when I was about 18, was, oh, I'll throw 150 feet one day. So actually getting it this year, 13 years later, was pretty cool, especially with the last, it was actually my very last hammer throw of the season at Pitlochry. And it's a hammer there I've always struggled with because it's lead and it's like this thin shaft.
Yeah.
And I tend to find that I either catch it or I don't. And I literally hadn't caught a single one in the last throw. It just felt nice.
It's always hard when there's pressure on implements. Like in Scotland, there's very few good implements, but there's pressure on the good ones. Yeah. Everyone expects you to throw far. There's also a nice 28 there, a nice lead ball, and we don't often get that here. But I wasn't there to see that, although I did see you go high 148s in Fergus at the World Championship. That was really impressive as well, because we had Damien Fisher there, who's also a big time hammer thrower, and went 150 the same day as you.
Yeah, it's funny. He'd never thrown it before, and then I remember going on Instagram. I was writing my post, and the first thing I saw was Damien Fisher, that is, saying, "Oh, through 150 there." I thought, what is the chances that the two of us have thrown this on the same day? Like, it's wild. I also have to say, I think Damien, in terms of like modern throwers that are thrown right now as we speak, I think he's one of the most impressive like technical throwers. I've never seen someone have like such a good technical grasp on pretty much every event. And I know like we could probably touch on Worlds, I suppose, because it's probably a highlight going to your World Championships for both of us. I have to say, like going over there, I really struggled with the trig setup and the hammer. I think I fouled one throw in each hammer. over here the rules are sort of like finish behind the trig. There you have to have like both feet behind the trig.
Yeah.
And on my first throw in the heavy hammer, which was first, I remember touching, like I was at the corner of the trig, and the guy fouled me, and I could just see my world crumbling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I was sitting like, what do I do?
It all started for me with the Braemar, which was the first event. So,
but yeah, I think episode 2 we're going to do like an entire recap of the worlds, and maybe like a shorter episode, but it's like how you get invited, etc. So that'll be the plan for the next one. But yeah, I have to say, like my highlights from the last 2 years are probably more consistency, less as you'd call it, shaking the bed sort of throws days where you turn up and you're like, oh no. But yeah, like I've really enjoyed my throwing, and it's been cool like going to games and like trying to just have consistency rather than I'll get one big throw here and there, and it's a different sort of mindset, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely, and I think that like having the 2 year break was a strange one, because you don't get that consistency of competition. What I've found is that getting a bit older, I'll be 37 going into season 2024. My strength's high. Like I went into this year 2023 strongest I've ever been in the gym, but it doesn't always transfer into throws. So I think the focus is going to shift, and again we'll probably talk about this in the future, but for me it's going to be more based towards sort of mobility and speed, to be honest. I think strength can come quickly, but I need to do a bit more throwing as I get older, and that's probably differs to what some people say, that you maybe don't have to throw as much, but for me I think it helps to get in that groove of getting out there and throwing as much as I can.
I think it's also like you're selling yourself short a bit here. You are one of the few Scottish throwers with a full head of hair. Obviously weeks past, John Hugh McLeod's joined the ranks of the Bald Brethren. So I think you're really flying the flag for the full head of hair, so I think you're selling yourself short on that front. But yeah, like again, taking the momentum, it's just trying to carry it year to year. And I have to say to you, like touching on what you just said, see the difference I feel in being 20 and doing the Highland Games to 30.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Like I've been ill like the last week or so, and normally like 10 years ago I'd have been, I'm training. I'm now at the point where I'm like, maybe this is better just to kind of take a light session or even not train at all. It's amazing how much it just impacts your immune system and your body differently.
Definitely, yeah. I think rest and recovery is just as important as the actual training now. I didn't used to focus on that at all, but I'm realising now that I do need to spend a bit more time on it. So now looking forward to next season, and again we'll cover what that looks like and what we're going to do in the off season in another episode. But in terms of the games being back, Kyle, what it's been pretty consistent in terms of throwers. We've had some like notable drop offs. So we did a podcast with him last series, but we've lost Scott Ryder. He wasn't back out in 22 or 23. That's a big one. He obviously won Worlds in 2016 and has been consistently throwing on the Scottish circuit for probably the last 10, 15 years even. Yeah. Your training partner, Lucas.
Lucas has moved back to Poland. He's settled back there with his family. And then obviously you can't mention Lucas without the other part of the duo there.
The big man.
You've got Sebastian, your spiritual father. There's so many pictures of you standing together at the games, and you think, who's that? Is that Sinclair? Is that Sebastian? We're not sure.
There was I think it was 2015. Webster Wells was in Dunfermline, and some like Strength and Power magazine or something. I don't know which one it was. It was a well-known one anyway. Came and like documented the whole weekend. There wasn't one picture of me in the magazine, but there were 3 pictures of Sebastian, and twice they named me as Sebastian. So he's just a lot bigger and a lot stronger if you actually saw us in person. But yeah, Sebastian looks like a fitness model now. I don't know if you've seen recent pictures.
I can't say I've seen one recently, but I know he'd lost a load of weight, and I believe he was doing personal training and whatnot. He was looking well, put it that way.
Yeah, he was. I think he's a bit of a celeb in Poland. He was into some politics as well.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, apparently.
The man's getting up there.
So yeah, a few sort of drop offs, just people retiring, I suppose, with age. But there's also some up and coming throwers as well, and more regularly, like Jamie Gunn's been throwing pretty well again the last couple of years.
Jamie and I are about the same age, so I feel like we've transitioned, like probably just before COVID, it was starting to happen, and obviously it got put in the back burner. But Jamie and I have came through the ranks together. We're the same age, so I think we're both what you'd call like an open thrower now, like thoroughly, if you know what I mean. You've also obviously we're talking about throwers that have maybe dropped off that aren't Scottish. Vlad's over pretty much most of the season now. He's here for the summer. He does his games. He competes. You tend to see him pretty much every weekend. Obviously, we have Craig Winslow. He is, I believe, we've got 2 world champions from the amateur field in our midst now, including yourself, Sinclair.
I won Minnesota in 2009, but it's a different one. Lots of federations in the games. But Craig went over to Norway this year and won the IHGF Amateur Worlds in FIFOR. I've never been over there. Have you done that one?
No, I've never been to the Intergalactic Highland Games Federation stuff. I've never been over, but I've heard the full week as a whole was like quite an impressive gathering of strength stars, if you want to call Jamie and Craig that.
I think there's lots of strength sports going on. Highland Games is the only tested one, Kyle.
That's true, but I think that's a can of worms, and you've not had enough beers to talk about that at length.
If you follow me on my new Instagram at Sync Patience, Man of the Modern World, if I do have a few beers, you'll see some drug posts.
That could be interpreted very differently. We'll swiftly move on from that. We're talking about the drop off of throwers, some of the new ones coming into the fold. Another strong show now, I would say, is the under 25s, the Glenfiddich Academy, the league, if you will, that I mean you and I were both products of. You compete in that from ideally 18 to 25. If you start winning it regularly and you're sort of dominating it, you should be sort of moved into the Open. So obviously this year there's been a strong showing in there. You had Sean Gunn, Jamie Gunn's younger, taller brother. Not as handsome in my opinion though. You have Murdo, who's from the West Coast. He's from Obanway. He's sort of graduating from that, if you will. And then you also have George Evans. George has a very strong background in sort of track and field. He's done discus and putt, right?
Yeah, George went on a scholarship to America. I think he's thrown close to 60 metres in the discus, but he's coming at the games. I think he just needs to train more consistently for the games.
Yeah.
And decide whether he wants to do the games or pursue athletics. I'm sure he could still throw far in shot put and disc, but he did come out and have some impressive performances this season. I think he put the light stone 57 foot in Aberdeen.
Yeah, that was it's a funny stone that as well because it's hard to catch. But I remember George turned up and we thought, here we go, and he had his big goofy trainers on that he puts in, and he was mashing the circle up, and they just came round to the front and just went hop.
Yeah,
and I watched it go to 57 foot, and I thought, here we go.
George is probably 6'5". He's a wee bit taller than you.
Yeah.
So he gets a big long push on the stone. But another one, you mentioned Murdo. I think Murdo's going through the incredible bulk that you went through a few years ago.
Yeah, for anybody that doesn't know, I went through, it would be 2017. I was widely referred to just about everyone as the incredible bulk because I was over 150 kilos, which I think is about 300 pounds. Is that right?
Nah, more than that. It'd be 330 pound.
Don't say that.
Yeah.
Good God. Anyway, I put on a lot of weight.
Maybe more.
Okay, we don't need to do the maths,
honestly,
right?
I think it's about 350.
We don't need the maths, right? It's fine. But I basically tore my stomach, and then I went over on my ankle, and it was just a season of silly injuries. The stomach was a bad one. But yeah, I kept eating as normal. I wasn't competing, wasn't training. I just put on a power of weight.
Yeah.
And it honestly took me until I think 2018 to even start really trimming it back down.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I didn't throw the weights incredibly far. I got my first ever 80 foot, but the weights never felt easier just because I was so heavy.
More to lean. Mass moves mass. Murdo had a pretty consistent season. To be fair, he was throwing well. I think he had long COVID apparently, so he put a bit of weight on, and I think if he trims up, he'll be there.
Also need to remember he did go over to, was it Brazier, and would he dislocate his knee, or
he dislocated his knee,
and that it was like a perfect storm of bad things happening. If you know
I think that was Murdo's last year, so he's gonna have to step up if he's coming into the Open, but I think he will. He's very strong, and I think he'll step up fine.
But he also, the games is he takes it so seriously. It's his passion. So
Yeah.
you know, he's training every day, and that's what his focus is.
Yeah. So no, I think it's strong. There's some good guys coming up there, early to mid-20s. Along with the guys that we've mentioned who are already in the Open. We also had some foreign athletes come over over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Scott Hutchison is one to mention.
Yeah, Scott HGH Hutchison.
Sorry, Scott. We're just... Kyle can explain.
No, we've made jokes that Scott's got a very strong facial feature of a black, thick beard. And I always joke that, you know, the bigger the beard, the more you're trying to cover the old HGH chin. And HG Hutchison just sounds so good. So I don't think anyone else calls him it except me, but maybe that can spread as a wild rumour.
But no, Scott's been throwing really well the last 2 years. He came over for probably a bit longer last year in 2022. I think he spent a good couple of months in Scotland. Really nice guy. Got on with everyone really well and put up some really strong competition. Pretty consistent, Scott, as well. Across the board, pretty consistent. But like, if you took his best throws, he's right up there. You know, he had some great days. Loves the smaller games.
He loves... I mean, is that something that you can relate to?
Not at all.
Going on a little holiday. No, but I know Scott's... I remember him saying, what's the one he went to first that's over by Loch Ness?
Oh, Glenucker.
Yeah, he says that like he likes that's one of his favourite games. So
Yeah.
I think we all have our wee games we've got like a soft spot for, and you can't help but go.
Yeah.
But yeah, Scott, I think last year he definitely did more. Was he here for what, a month this year?
Yeah, about
Something
a
like
month.
that.
And again, I only threw with Scott once this year at Crieff, and it was good to see him again. But I think from what I saw, he had some good throws. So
Pretty strong as well. I remember him posting some pretty impressive gym numbers like on Instagram again.
I always find that he seems to train in like a recreation centre or something. It looks like a warehouse.
The local YMCA.
Yeah, hey.
Listen, you train where you can sometimes, you know what I mean? And I mean, I've no doubt we'll see him again. The other very impressive competitor that we've seen a lot of this year was Aaron Castle, another American. I believe his I don't know if it's his fiance or his wife's. I want to say a Swedish. I'm going to say discus thrower and commit to it. She's definitely a track and field thrower. So he sort of frequents like Europe as well as going back to the States. And he said he'll probably be a more regular feature, which is fantastic when he's got a background in shot put and weight throwing. Yeah. I threw him a lot in the weights here, and there's multiple times he beat me by like 6 inches or a foot. And there's a story of the first time I actually beat him in a weight. It was the heavyweight at Bridge of Allen. I'd had, let's say, an icky tummy. I was using the facilities and in a bit of a panic state, and I ended up having to run out to take my throw. And you know those throws where you're maybe ill or you don't feel great and you just don't expect anything? Yeah. I just stood up at the end and lifted it, and I was like, oh, so I'm only beaten by a couple of inches, but I will take that as probably one of my highlights of the year, if I'm being honest.
No, definitely. I only threw with Aaron at a Boyne this year. But again, similar to Damien, quite a nice thrower to watch. Very, very relaxed, very smooth. I do think I took the heavyweight win at a Boyne.
There you go. See, we've both got one over him.
But no, Aaron was good to watch. Good thrower.
Yeah, it's, I mean, the other honourable mentions that are over most seasons now are, I mean, Glenn from Belgium, Glenn Nice, he's over most seasons now, tends to do Games Week, I think. And I know he was well travelled this year over to the States and whatnot. And then you had the Zylstras over. Both Wout and I'm probably going to say it wrong. He chinned me for it a few times, but Tied,
his younger brother,
both look like they could do the games, or they could probably fall back into athletics, like in a good way as well, because they're both so athletic.
yeah. I think, with Wout, like, very impressive in the weight over the bar. Like that was really impressive. I think he was easily going 17 foot. Knockoff bars are different, obviously, over in Scotland, but yeah, he had the height for 17 consistently, and then his caber was also pretty strong as well.
Yeah,
I think he's come from a shot put background. He's still gliding, and his stones were kind of hit or miss when he was over here, but I did see that he'd had some big throws back home. We'll see how that goes next year.
Yeah, I think next year we're probably going to have, like, I dare say, more if we call them visitors to the games, and all that does is it kind of drives the standard up. But yeah, it's I mean, I'd say the games are in a fairly healthy position. There's just some new blood that want to, you know, we need people to sort of train and really carry it and run with it. Which actually brings us on to the next point, which is something that I think is very important for the games, is that I'd say over the last few years here, maybe the last 5 years, it's went from becoming like a random thing to it's pretty regular. We're now having more regular women's events at the games. There was a few games this year. I know you said was it
Inverness had more female throwers than male throwers this year, and it's not like there were 2 females and 1 male. I think there were over 10 female throwers, so really good numbers. And I think games are sort of sitting up and taking notice now that this is something that needs to happen. There's probably just things to discuss about how that's going to pan out over the next few years, because there are athletes there now. I think consistently in Scotland you have up to 10 female throwers, and some of them are young, like Jules.
Jules Ramsey.
Is it Jules Ramsey? Yeah, Jules is a great thrower, and if you watch her throw, her techniques are brilliant.
She's putting us to shame.
Yeah, really
I mean, her body weight to move around with a 56 and even turn weight is. I mean, I'm impressed when I watch her like spin around with a 56.
Really impressive.
Even the hammer, she's thrown some of the junior male implements, and she's in the mix. You know.
Yeah. It's
impressive to see, and I said this before last time, and I'll say it again. That the women's heavy events in Scotland kind of needs like, it needs somebody to sort of run with it and, you know, train with it and really make it like their niche. And I think Jules could be the person to like possibly do it.
Although she's started playing rugby as well, so I don't know, she might get snapped up.
Well, I know she did get a wee injury at the end of the year in the garden. I believe she got tackled and went over on her ankle or something.
Yeah.
And a pothole that ironically she'd been thrown, and we both know that I suffered from that a few years ago. I went over on my ankle and twisted it. So I hope she got a quick recovery and she gets back at it for sort of the winter and gets a good winter under her belt.
Yeah, no, it'd be great. It'd be great to see more youngsters coming up. I think there's probably issues that the games need to address themselves with females. I mean, you're essentially doubling potentially the number of competitors that you have on the field. So one of the big things is just like how that works logistically, and it's something new for games. It's great. It's a real positive, but it's also quite a challenge for these committees. Because they need to think about what the field looks like, how many athletes are they going to have on the field, is it safe? So these are all kind of barriers that games will need to overcome. But as you said, I think it's a real positive that we're seeing the female heavy sort of come to Scotland.
Yeah, and again, the logistics of it is that the sport that we do, that we've fell into, if you will, it's not really changed a whole lot in like centuries. And a lot of the games, you know, they advertise themselves. We've said this before and touched on it. It's the first Saturday in August. It's this. Their fields are the same. They've not changed. They've got the same events going on every year, and it's where do you fit it in? And the other thing is, and I don't mean this in necessarily a disrespectful way, there's a big difference between the sport in America and here.
Yeah.
Here it's still the core of spectator sport, and they don't want 50 people on a field throwing between male and female.
Yeah, I think something I would say on numbers is if you're any athlete and you're coming to Scotland to throw, just be respectful of the committees. I think we're probably aware of circumstances that happened this season and last where athletes have got in touch with games and put pressure on them to run certain events and said that there'd be repercussions if that didn't happen. I think repercussions in that they would go to the press and kick up a fuss if they weren't allowed to throw. I think everyone's trying really hard to put things on the radar, put things on the map, but we just need to work together with the people who actually run the games. Like in our case, it's just committees. I suppose in America it's more athletic directors, but
yeah,
we're as you said, things are still pretty traditional in Scotland, and it's the people who are running games have done so for the last 30, sometimes 40 years. So we just need to be understanding of that and work with them, not against them.
We also probably have to remind ourselves, and these aren't paid positions. This isn't someone's profession. This is what like Billy the farmer down the road does in his spare time, and goes to his meetings and he organises it. And like Sinclair's probably put it more eloquently than I could, but I know Braemar, the last 2 years, I've been there trying to get in a mindset to throw and try and do well. And when you've got quite literally random people who have never thrown in their life turning up at what is, I would argue, one of the biggest games in the world. And
Which
again,
is one.
but well, yeah, but they're turning up there to throw, and they've got no experience. It's not safe for them. It's not safe for people watching. You shouldn't be turning up at Braemar. In the last 2 years, there's been two throwers turned up each year that shouldn't be on the field.
Yeah.
And it's probably partially responsible for the games to turn around and say, I'm sorry, this is a prestigious event. There are actually standards that they advertise in their programme.
Yeah.
Creef is the same. If you don't meet them, you shouldn't really be throwing.
Creef, Aboyne, Braemar, they're all some of the biggest games in Scotland. And look, I would say most, like 99% of the time, we're very welcoming to any athletes coming to have a throw, even if you haven't thrown before. But pick your battles, and if that's the case, do a bit of research and
ask people.
ask
Where
us,
should I go?
Because if people do turn up to those games and they've never thrown before, they're not going to get the warmest of welcome.
No, I can't hide my disdain anymore. Like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
If someone's turning up and you saw that there's multiple implements that were broken this year by people who didn't quite know what they were doing or were out of their depth.
Yeah.
And like some of these are like often 100 years old plus.
Yeah.
And that's not what we want to see. Like, they don't want to be doing that. Nobody wants to see that. So it's just like know your field and know where you should be picking your battle. Pitch up your tent, your flag where you should.
Yeah, but don't wear face paint either.
But yeah, I have to say it's weird that the popularity of the games, so to speak, can be like a negative. But it's one of those things that it's such a different beast across the Atlantic Ocean, and here it's not so much about just everyone gets their day to throw. It's a competition here. It's a sport.
Yeah.
But I think we'd both agree, and we were talking about this even during the season, that the games have came back 2022 and 2023 to amalgamate them together in a very strong position. I've seen crowds at games that I've not seen, like in terms of strength. There's been really, really good attendance, both crowds and athletes and participants across the board. I know the only thing that's like really, really struggling just now, I believe, is the tug of war.
Yeah, I think with tug of war, I suppose prize money's a factor. There's not a huge amount of prize money. There's other sports.
Yeah,
a lot of the tug of war guys play rugby as well.
Yeah.
So to get together a large team of men or women to commit to doing something every weekend is quite an ask.
And I think I doubt any heavy in the world would argue when you go to a games and there's not enough teams in the tug of war and we get peer pressured into doing it. I think we would probably all agree that it's one of the things that ruins your day because it's so difficult.
It's so hard, yeah.
Like,
there's a lot of technique to it as well. It's probably at least 60-70% technique as well. But yeah, it's a tough sport, tug of war.
Yeah, that's I feel like it's something you could talk at length, and the few times I've been, and I'm going to say unfortunate enough to do it, you get into that weird sort of feeling where you're like, oh, I should be lying at 45 degrees on a rope, and that feels normal.
Yeah,
it's not something I would be choosing to do every weekend, put it that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But no, I would agree with Kyle. I think the games in Scotland have seen a really strong comeback. 22 and 23 have both been great seasons. Again, massive thanks to the committees and everyone involved with running the games. It's been so good to get back on the field and compete again.
Yeah, it's a weird thing because you spend all summer together, right? And then we're all like old sweetie wifeys. We're phoning each other in the week talking about the games, and I know I make jokes, but I know a lot of the wives will be like, "Oh, what, you didn't talk about the games again?" It's true. It takes over, and all you're thinking about is games, and the second it's gone, you just want it back, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we're in what are we in mid-November now, but yeah, already looking forward to April.
Yeah, that's kind of the nature of the beast. But the plan is we're going to try and record a few of these, get them out fairly regularly, even if it's a couple of months or we'll see what's happening. But we're definitely back for season 2. If you do want to reach out to us at all, Instagram's probably the best way. Sinclair labelled himself earlier as a modern man, so he's on social media again, Instagram under Sink Patience. That's sink as in SINC, not your kitchen sink, and then patience, which is something that I don't possess. And I'm on there as Kilted Kyle. That's because my name's Kyle and I wear a kilt. Pretty simple, but that's episode 1. Again, if you have any thoughts on topics or things you'd like us to talk about or address, etc., just send us a wee message. We're happy to put them on, and this will be going out in quite a few forms of media. Just let us know where you can. And just thanks for listening. I think it's worth saying as well, last season I've done the tally and we've got over 5,000 listens to the sort of season 1, which I think was it 8 episodes, 6, 7, 8 episodes. I mean, we probably should be more organised, but just thank you to everyone that's listened. I had a lot of fun making it, and I know you've said that people still message you saying, "Oh, I love the podcast," and I was surprised at some of the people that ended up listening to it and were saying, "Oh, thanks for doing it." So thanks to you folks. You're the reason we kind of keep doing it.
Yeah, definitely. It's been really enjoyable, and it's great to get back for a second season. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you soon, folks.
Yeah, cheerio. Take it easy.